God loves you because I have felt completely like barely awake all day long, and just in the last 30 minutes or so, I feel awake. Kind
Well,
of.
good. I think we are live now on YouTube. Yes. And
Where's Mr.
and we're
Victor?
live on Facebook. I think he had a few things he needed to finish wrapping up, I'm guessing.
I'm gonna go ahead and share then this on my Facebook. I thought we had like that Mishnah walk thing going, the Mishnah walk road. I wanted to say road to recovery. Road to recovery. Let's see.
Yeah, I don't
Uh,
think I have that on my computer that I can play it.
uh, Mishnah walk.
Let's see if I can change the title on YouTube because we are not talking about Passover.
The Mishnah walk is not coming up on my book.
It it'll be on Victor's profile
Oh,
and then
it's still
on
odd because it should be popping up. Did you share it to the group as well? I can do
I
that
have
if you want
not
me.
yet.
I'll do
Yes, that
that.
would be
I'll do that then.
great if you can.
Yeah. All right. I believe it's all done. You still with us?
Yes, I am.
Well, Stove, welcome to the Mishnah Walk. Today we will be preparing you guys with a little bit of an introduction to Shavuot, more widely known as Pentecost. We will discuss what it is and what it isn't, historically speaking, in the historical classical faith of the people of Israel, based upon God's explicit commands in the Torah, his everlasting covenant with the people of Israel, his everlasting people of covenant. Shalom, Victor. Baruch haba.
It's still me.
Oh,
I'm
you are
I'm
the
on
Victor Schultz.
I am on his account.
I didn't see the little name down
I
there. All right, let's go ahead and jump in. No time to waste. Hmm. You see my screen?
um yes,
All right. I'm going to go ahead and read this to save ourselves some time.
perfect.
All right. Let me shrink this sucker. There we go. Okay. So upon entering a place of study, we say, May it be your will before you, Adonai Elohai, O eternal, the powerful authority over me. That I should not stumble in a matter of halacha in any point of the practical consensus application of your commandments. That I should not say regarding what is impure that it is, nor regarding what is pure that is not pure. Nor should I say regarding what is permitted that is forbidden. Nor should we say, myself or others, that that which is permitted is forbidden, or that which is forbidden is permitted. And in doing this, I shall not stumble in a point of halakha, in a point of proper execution, proper implementation of your commandments. And my fellows shall rejoice with me. And so in my doing so, also my fellows shall likewise not stumble in a matter of halakha because of me. And I shall rejoice with them. Can you hear all son when Omar? And everybody said,
Man.
and everybody said, oh, hello there.
Hello.
I'm seeing double, or am I? There we go.
I think so.
How you doing? Long time no speak.
Yeah, doing good. I'm doing good. I appreciate all the prayers for sure. Surgery went well. I'm recovering. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, I hear you beautifully.
Okay. Had issues with the horses getting out, so I had to go out and fix their fencing, and so that put me
Can't let
behind.
the horses be running loose and taking over the neighborhood.
No, the big issue was I needed to get the sheep in where I had to put the horses. I had to, and I needed to heal up enough to be able to fix the fence. So
I feel
anyway,
you.
it was a busy day.
Yeah, not exactly something you can do when you're bedridden, you know.
Yeah.
Were you bedridden?
No, are you kidding? No, I was up. I was actually up almost immediately. Basically, I let's see. I think they probably pulled the breathing tube out probably like
Oof.
2:30. Yeah, so I know.
I could feel it. Just
It hurt my throat for a while. I told him, I says, "Is there anything else we can do? Can we do? Can I be awake for this?" And anyway, he's like, "No." I was like, "Great." So anyway, my voice was messed up for a few days.
you sound great now.
See, they fixed it. Where was I?
Well, are you ready to jump into Shavuoth, to stand at Har Sinai once again, Mount Sinai?
Did you already cover Rosh Chodesh?
Excellent. I was wanting to do that, and I already have it pulled up. I didn't know you were thinking the same thing. What a coincidence.
Sharing a brain.
So let's go ahead and do that. It's Rosh Chodesh, so that's not the focus of today's lesson, but it is the case that today is Rosh Chodesh. What is Rosh Chodesh? That is the head of a month, in reference to the beginning of the biblical months, according to the biblical calendar. The people of Israel follow the biblical calendar, the calendar that the God of all existence decreed and commanded his people to follow. So if you are one who is chosen, one of the chosen people, I don't care whether you consider yourself a Muslim, part of the chosen ummah, or you're a Christian and you consider yourself part of the chosen people. If you say you have chosen God, if you say God has chosen you, that means you have chosen to uphold his commandments. And those commandments which he commanded as an everlasting law, as an everlasting commandment, are not annulled. They are not nullified unless we are to claim, heaven forbid, that he goes back on his word. So if you identify with the people of God, I don't care what your background is, today is the head of a month according to the God of all existence. The God of Israel is the God of heaven and earth, not just the God of a little nomadic Hebrew tribe in the desert. So if you join yourself into the Lord, there is no such thing as joining yourself into the Lord and not also joining yourself unto his people, his historical people. So celebrate with us the marking of the new month. We will now read the blessing. We're not saying it with intent to fulfill the obligation right now, but this is sort of an introduction so that when you go outside tonight or tomorrow night, whenever you're able to see the new moon, this is an impetus and sort of a structure through which you can give praise to the Almighty when the moon is renewed, as it is now, as a reminder that when the moon is renewed, we do not give praise to the moon, heaven forbid, like the fools who walk and grope in darkness, or who imagine that the moon is does some kind of justice to the glory of the Creator. No, it's infinitely inferior to the Creator himself. So when we see the beauty of the new moon, we do not praise the moon, but we stand in opposition to the fools of history who would sacrifice humans, even little children, in their folly. And we turn instead when we see the beauty of the new moon, and we turn our hearts not to the moon, but to the maker of heaven and earth. So join with me. We will now recite the blessing of the new moon. Say it together with me under your breath. Make sure you have your mics on mute. And you can pause this, screenshot it, and then go out and read it tomorrow night or tonight if you're able to see it. So upon seeing the reappearance of the moon, say, "Most worthy of worship and source of all blessing are you, O eternal, the powerful authority over us, King of all existence, who by his utterance created the heights of the heavens and all their hosts with the breath of his mouth. He gave them a fixed law and a schedule, that their tasks not be changed. They are happy and rejoice to do the will of their possessor, trustworthy doers of truth. And he said to the moon, Be renewed as a diadem of splendor to those born of the womb, that in the future they shall likewise be renewed, to glorify their Maker for the glory of his dominion. Most worthy of worship and source of all blessing are you, O eternal, who renews the moons, renewer of months. That's the same expression in Hebrew. We have embedded in this, some of the wording may be kind of unusual, right? What does it mean? A diadem of splendor to those born of the womb. You could also translate this as those who are burdened of the womb. So it could also be understood as a reference to a indirect reference to women, or a direct reference to women. And why would that be? Anybody have any idea why that might be? What's the connection between women and the new moon? How does the new moon especially relate to women? It's also directly related to what we said before we said these words of praise, these coronations of the God of heaven and earth. Directly related between women, the new moon, and the rejection of the foolishness of idolatry. So there is an ancient Jewish tradition. Yes, sir. I see somebody smiling. What's going on? What happened?
I was going to let Heather answer that.
Everybody's on ChatGPT now. Typing.
I've got a lot of little cleaning up to do for the stream. So
you look, your hair looks cleaned up too. You look spiffy. Did you get a haircut?
I don't have my headphones on. It's probably
oh, maybe that's what I'm used to seeing you with the headphones. That's what it is.
Yeah. Heather,
Okay.
I'm gonna let you answer that then.
So there's an ancient Jewish tradition that when the men of Israel were rebelling against God and creating a golden calf as a representation of the God of Israel through which to worship him, right? And the mistake was not that they were so stupid that they thought this statue that they made was God. They knew that's not the true creator, but also a representation of the creator is also called Elohim throughout the Bible. That does not mean the representation is understood to be literally God, but the creator of the universe forbade us from worshiping him even through representatives, whether of stone and flesh, whether of stone or wood or of flesh, right? It doesn't matter. There is no difference between worshiping a stone, a golden calf, or the most glorious and righteous prophet of Israel. No difference. Heaven forbid that we should turn his servants into idols. So there is an ancient tradition of Israel that when the men of Israel were rebelling and had decided, in lieu of Moses, who was absent longer than they had expected, that they would make a different representative of the creator, a more tangible representative. The women of Israel, when they were asked for their jewelry, refused. And so there's a tradition that in honor of them on Rosh Chodesh, on the new moon, women are not obligated to abstain from all work, but they are not to be held under the regular pressures of the month. And so they are to be given room to rest if they so choose, because historically they kind of took upon themselves to observe the new moon more stringently than the men of Israel did. And this is kind of connected to that idea. It's considered an ancient tradition that they were given that blessing to be extra, to have an extra rest on the new moon that the men of Israel are not officially absolved from, right? But again, to be very clear, this is not a technical, a legal requirement that women abstain from certain activities like we do on Shabbat. This is more of a voluntary thing. So in other words, if a woman on this day of the week is usually going to be very burdened with making the meal for the family or doing laundry, a husband can step in, or the other men of the house or children, if they're old enough, and try to pick up some of that burden on this day with a joyful spirit, with a spirit of gratitude and admiration for their mother, and not in a spirit of animosity or begrudgingly. All right, בואו נמשיך. Let's move on to Shavuot.
Well, you got me. I was thinking something to do with a cycle, a normal cycle. Just
It is related to a cycle as well. I mean, these things are probably all interconnected. I've not done extensive research into this specific topic, but it seems like there's a connection between the moon, cycle, women, and they kind of tied it all in together, you know. And you don't have to believe it's historically all hard and fast historical truth. I don't know, but this is the ancient tradition of Israel, and something that the women of Israel historically took upon themselves. Yes, sir.
Oh,
I see you.
I was just thinking that it might the new moon would signify the 15 days before they turn into werewolves, but I could be wrong. No,
Looks to me more like Heather's turning into the Shekhinah,
that's probably why.
manifest glory, also connected to the new moon, right? Yalla, בואו נמשיך. Let's continue. Heather, would you like to read leading us up to Shavuot, also known as Pentecost? We have the counting of the Omer, so let's just review that real quickly before we get into the slides.
I'll do my best. The light is a little bit bright on my screen, so correct me if I misread anything.
No wonder I see the rays of glory all around you.
Yes, I'm sitting
you look
outside.
very ethereal.
That is that he commanded us to count 49 days from the harvesting of the Omer, and that is his, may he be exalted, saying, you shall count for yourselves 7 weeks from the morrow of the Shabbat, etc. And you should know that just like the court is obligated to count the years of the Jubilee year by year and cycle by cycle, as we explained in what came previously.
In Sefer HaMitzvot, positive commandment 140.
So too is each and every one of us obligated to count the day of the Omer, day by day and week by week. And that is his having said, you must count 50 days, and 7 weeks you shall count for yourself. And just like the commandment of counting, the years and the sabbatical cycles is one commandment. As we explained, so too is the counting of the Omer, one commandment. And do not be fooled by their saying, it is a commandment to count days, and it is a commandment to count weeks, and think that they are 2 commandments. For it is a commandment to do each and every part of the commandments that have different parts. However, had they said, from where do we know that the days are a commandment, and from where do we know that the weeks are a commandment, that would have been 2 commandments, and this will not be lost on the one that will not be fooled by the words. Since were you to say it is an obligation to do such and such, it surely does not necessarily make that action a separate commandment. And the clear proof for this is our counting every night that it is such and such weeks and such days.
Meaning
we're-
each and every day is a separate counting, right?
Mhm.
But it's not considered as separate commandments. It's not of the tally of 613 commandments, everlasting commandments that are the conditions, the stipulations of the covenant of Torah. We do not count each of the 49 days that are counting as a commandment in and of themselves to be tallied into the 613. That's the point he's making. So likewise, we don't consider the counting of the days and the counting of the weeks as separate commandments.
And were it to be a separate commandment, we would only arrange its content on the night of Shavuot, and we would say 2 blessings on the counting of the Omer and on the counting of the weeks of the Omer. But the things are not like this. Rather, the commandment is counting the Omer daily and weekly together as they are ordained. And women are not obligated in this commandment. See Parashat Emor, Mishnah Torah, Daily Offerings, and Additional Offerings 10.
All right. And as with all things, so long as a woman is capable of doing it, it is certainly praiseworthy that she would do it, but she should not be pressured or made to feel inferior or like she's sinning if she does not do it, right? And also, though it's praiseworthy for a woman to do this and other commandments that she's not technically obligated in, a woman should also be careful, as well as communities, to not push for women doing all these commandments voluntarily, especially as on an individual level, if they are not yet fulfilling their duties, their basic obligations that they are, in fact, duty bound to do. So, for example, Mr. Victor, can you give an example? Heather, can you give an example? Some things that perhaps many women in the Jewish community, maybe not, or certain communities, depends on the community, certain Torah commandments that maybe many women are not careful to do. And it's not necessarily an act of rebellion. They may just not know. So what are some things such as, that they should be careful to do before they start taking on extra things like counting of the Omer?
Oh, you lost me at that they would not know, because I would imagine they would know them, but they would also know that they don't have to do them. Like
the majority of the Jewish people, whether male or female, unfortunately have not had the privilege of sufficient education in Torah. So, but this is also the case in the Haredi world, in the ultra-Orthodox world. But again, that's only about 8 to 10% of the entire Jewish world. So there's definitely, not just with women, but the entire Jewish people, there's a lot of education lacking. All right, so I'll give one example. The separating challah. If you're baking bread, taking out a small percentage of challah, right? A small percentage of the dough before you bake the bread, right? That's one such commandment. Any other? Let's just do 3 and then we'll keep on. Daily prayer. How about honoring parents or honoring her husband? Ooh, heaven forbid that a woman should honor her husband, and yes, men should honor their wives as well. 2 things can be true at the same time. But heaven forbid we should say in 2025 that a wife should honor her husband. Heaven forbid, right?
Don't go there.
All right. I already went there. Too late. No, it's very, very true and very, very relevant. What is this that
so we separate challah, or actually I don't. I basically my wife does it because we've always looked at it as something that she can do. In other words, it's her blessing. It's her.
Yeah. Well, technically, a man can do that as well. But the thing is that historically and still currently, 9 times out of 10, it's a woman who's baking. 9 times out of 10.
Right.
We don't where in our everyday life, we don't use the example of the 1% exception to the rule. But yeah, that's not only upon a woman, but it's something that a woman would usually do because typically, even if she's a full-time professor at a university or a doctor, is typically the wife who's cooking. That's just the way it is. We're not
If
talking about how it should be that way. That's just the
if
way it
she's
is.
making the bread, I don't run in there and grab a piece and stick it in the oven at 450
Right.
to because and say the blessing because it should be given to her to do that.
And we should
Not
also point out
yeah
that, lighting candles before Shabbat, that's also something unique to women, not because men are exempt from it. You only need one in a house, and usually the wife is already at home or at home before the man, historically, okay? And I'm speaking not to you guys, but to whoever may be watching. If your wife is not doing it, then of course it's upon the man to do it. Lighting the candles before Shabbat, that is before sunset. Sunset has already occurred, you don't do it. But 9 times out of 10, a woman of Israel with good intentions, all right, I'm not trying to come down heavy-handed, I'm just trying to inform people. 9 times out of 10, a Jewish woman is more cautious to light candles before Shabbat than to separate challah from dough if she's making bread. But what we're saying is one of these is not like the other. One of these is a direct command of God. And even if we don't believe in God, but we're just keeping Torah because it's what my ancestors were doing, still, one of these is not like the other. The separating of the challah, of the little quantity of dough when you're baking bread, is a Torah obligation. It's a Torah commandment. It's one of the oldest of Jewish traditions, not any random tradition. It's one of the most sacred of Jewish traditions. Whereas lighting the candles before Shabbat is also beautiful and sacred, but it is not one of the oldest practices of the people of Israel. And in fact, it's even been a point of contention among the people of Israel, i.e., the Karaites. But Halah is something that unifies the people of Israel. Yallah. So that was just one such example. So yes, counting the Omer, women are not obligated to do it. If they want to do it, that's praiseworthy. But before making a big deal about doing voluntary commandments in the world of femininity, before we make a big deal or a big mission about the right to voluntarily do things, surely they have such a right. But let's first make sure we're doing what we're obligated to do. Right? We don't need to be separating communities over women wearing tefillin when those same women are not separating challah or they're not praying every day, right? So we have to be careful not to conflate political agendas or social agendas with Torah Judaism. They're certainly interconnected, but they are not the same, especially when it comes to political fads and social trends. Certainly there's relevance in both directions, but they are not the same. I know I'm preaching to the choir here. Again, as for whoever is watching. Let's continue. So, why did we just read about the Omer? This is going to be the culmination of the counting of the Omer next week, Sunday night. I believe it's the night of June 1st. No, the night of June 2nd. Night of June 1st, I believe. It's Sunday night until Monday night. That is the Torah mandated holiday of Shavuoth, also known as Passover. And by rabbinic decree, it is 2 days. But the second day is not exactly like the first day in its source, in its origin. So what is the connection between Pentecost, Shavuot, and the counting of the Omer? Well, Pentecost, the Greek, coming from the Greek name for the holiday of Shavuot, means 50. It means 50. You cannot... Somebody needs to turn off their microphone. I'm not sure who that is. It is not possible to celebrate Pentecost, i.e., to celebrate the 50th, if you did not yet do 1 through 49. So what is 1 through 49? Most people who imagine that their celebrating Pentecost / Pentecostal do not even know what the word means, much less what the 1 through 49 refers to. So before we can get to Pentecost, before we can get to Shavuot, before we can celebrate the fullness of the Spirit of God, according to the tradition of the prophets of Israel, we first have to stand with the people of Israel in the Exodus. We first have to sacrifice the sacred cow or the sacred calf and be willing to defy the public pressure in doing that, i.e., the idolatrous people of Egypt, by sacrificing their God and no longer worshiping it, to be defiant against that calf worship, right? The worship of a lamb or of any image. Stand with Israel, accept the unleavened bread in submission to the God of Israel, and be willing to exit the place of idolatry, to go through the Red Sea, right? That's hashtag biblical baptism, right? That was the baptism of the entire nation. And on the individual level today, that would be the waters of the mikvah, the waters of the mikveh, right? And all of this is after circumcision. You cannot eat the Pesach offering. You cannot eat the Passover offering unless you're circumcised. Two things can be true at the same time, and in this case, they must be. Yes, there is a circumcision of the heart, but that circumcision of the heart requires a circumcision of the flesh if you are a man, right? And you cannot get to Pentecost unless you have first gone through that. There is no Pentecost in line with the prophets of Israel until we've first gone through that process. So now we've reached that process. Now we've embraced the Torah. We're ready to take upon ourselves the fullness of the commandments at Mount Sinai, the fullness of his revelation. Here we are. So this is a summary review of the obligations of Shavuot, Pentecost. Mr. Victor, can you summarize for us again, what does Pentecost mean and why is it called Pentecost? I can't hear you.
I wasn't talking. Sorry.
You want to defer?
I would. I'll be back in a few minutes. I'm not
Oh, you okay? Oh, man.
in a bit of pain.
Oh, dude, I'm sorry. Heather, can you remind us, why is Pentecost called Pentecost? What does it refer to?
It refers to 50.
All right, and what is that 50? 50 what?
Well,
Why do we call it 50?
50 days from Passover, correct?
All right. So observance of Passover and that commandment to count the days is inherent to the celebration of Shavuot, Pentecost. And Shavuot itself means weeks, again, referring to the counting of the 7 weeks. So Pentecost, the Greek term, refers to the counting of the days, and the Hebrew term, Shavuot, refers to the counting of the weeks, and they are the same number. Heather, would you like to read the summary for us on the left?
Yes. Shavuot celebrates the early summer harvest and the giving of the Torah at Sinai, highlighting the proper physical and spiritual sustenance to go together.
Do go together, that proper physical and spiritual sustenance go together. They cannot be separated.
The 𝗧cie
Perfect. Sheteh halehem.
and 𝗣𝗿 express
Perfect.
gratitude for the land's bounty and the humility before God that naturally flows from sincere gratitude, which
All right.
culminates.
The Sheteh halehem is a reference to the 2 loaves of bread that are waved as an offering in the temple, and the 𝗣𝗿 is the first fruit offering. So let's read that one more time and continue.
The 𝗧cie halehem. You want me to read the whole sentence?
Yeah. Just continue from there now that they know what that is.
And 𝗣𝗿 express gratitude for the land's bounty and the humility before God that naturally flows from sincere gratitude, which culminates in the acceptance of the kingdom of heaven, the acceptance of God's Torah, Rabbinic tradition teaches that the Torah was offered to all nations, but only Israel embraced it, making Shavuot a festival of both gift and chosen responsibility. Shavuot is an annual reminder to Israel and the world that the universal invitation remains open to all who heed the call of the shofar.
Excellent. So these are the obligations, right? And again, these are all summaries, and we will expound upon it a little bit. And there will, of course, be more details to learn, but this is just an introduction. So number one, many people do not realize, but the people of Israel, Judaism, has pilgrimages, Hajj. Everybody knows Hajj to Mecca, the pilgrimage to Mecca. Where did that come from? It's from the Torah, it's from the Jewish faith. And not only do we have a Hajj, in Hebrew, Hag, same etymology, but we have three. And where to are they? To the location of the national temple, the Temple of Israel, which is established in Jerusalem. 𝗟𝗄𝘀 pilgrimage to the sanctuary. All right, so that's the sanctuary and the place that the Almighty would choose, which we all know, according to the prophets of Israel, according to King David, is Jerusalem. That's number one. These are Torah obligations. We're looking here at the Torah obligations associated with proper historical observance of the holiday, the pilgrimage holiday of Shavuot. Number one, the pilgrimage to the sanctuary in Jerusalem, where it's now located. Number two, would you like to read?
Sure. Simhat HaRegalim, rejoicing on the festivals.
All right. Heather, number three.
The Musaf, additional offering.
Number four, the Sheteh HaLechem, the two loaves that are a wave offering in the temple. Number five.
The Bikurim, first fruits procession.
Number six.
Rest on Shavuot.
Number seven, that worship is only proper worship if it is together with the expression of compassion, right? And we will see more how that relates specifically to Shavuot in the following slides.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir. How you feeling, Habibi?
I just had a moment there, sorry. The Torah being offered to all nations, the world.
Yes.
You know, I've often thought about, I've actually been thinking about it, and because in other words, was it offered to Egypt? Was it offered to those who are the enemies of Israel? In other words,
Yes.
how open was this offering? You know, would they have just let them in, let everyone in?
And that's the question?
Kind of, yeah, because
Okay.
I think about how we left Egypt, those who were oppressing us, and then we say the Torah was offered to everyone, and
Yes.
only Israel accepted it, and which I find amazing. It seems like those who went with Israel probably also accepted.
Of course they did. That's explicit in the text of the Torah. That's explicit in the text of the Torah. Even what's called the mixed multitude, the 𝗟𝘄𝘀, on multiple occasions in the Torah, in the plain reading of the Torah, this 𝗟𝘄𝘀, the mixed multitude, is categorized under the category of the people of Israel. They are referred to as among the people of Israel multiple times. Not among as infiltrators, but as parts, as members of the people of Israel. They are no longer representatives of Egypt. Meaning, yes, they do represent, in some sense, Egypt, but they don't represent Egypt as a whole. So their accepting of the Torah does not mean that Egypt as a whole accepted Torah, right? And this is the case with all nations. An entire nation can accept the Torah, of course. But what we're saying is, up to that point at Mount Sinai, there was no nation that, as a nation, embraced the Torah, right? And yes, the Torah had not been given. The entire concept of God offering the Torah to all nations, this is midrashic. That means it's not something that's explicit in the text of the Torah, the 5 books of Moses. Nobody claims it's explicit in the text. It's a midrash. It's a expounding on the text. And really, in the midrash, it says that the words of the Torah at Mount Sinai went out to all nations in 70 languages. Sound familiar? The God's message. The God's message. The 𝗟𝗄𝘀. What does gospel mean? Right? It's the good message of God, right? The gospel went out, the Jewish gospel, the original gospel, went out in 70 languages. I don't think that's a coincidence that it happened, according to Jewish tradition, on Shavuoth. And not only that, but it went out with tongues of fire in 70 languages. Can't be a coincidence.
No.
Nothing's new under the sun, right? But I personally do not think this literally happened. Maybe it did. I'm not like I'm not a staunch atheist on it. I don't know what happened. It could have happened, certainly within God's power. But I think that 9 times out of 10, when the midrash, this genre of ancient Jewish literature, speaks about grand things, I think that 9 times out of 10 is teaching us a fundamental lesson in a very figurative and often hyperbolic way. And in this case, my personal opinion, you don't have to agree with it, my personal opinion is that when it says that God gave the opportunity to accept the Torah, he offered it to all the nations, but they didn't accept it. For me, I think that means more than likely in God's foreknowledge, in his omniscience, in his knowing how things would be, he knew that the nations would reject it. And had they been willing as a nation to accept it, it would have been revealed to them, but it wasn't. And the reason it wasn't isn't because God inherently has some animosity against different nations, whereas with Israel or the people of Israel, there's something inherently special, intrinsically special with them on some genetic level. I think that's all nonsense. And I also find it antithetical to the plain message of the Torah, that he is not, the creator of Israel is not a respecter of persons. And he does not punish children for the sins of their fathers. Yes, he brings on the negative consequences of the sins of the fathers, but that's on the condition that the children of those sinful fathers continue in the sinful way of their fathers. That's clear in the 10 Commandments. That the negative consequences of our ancestors only continue upon us if we continue to walk in their way as haters of the God of all existence, but not if we become lovers of the God of all existence. And so, in my understanding, when it says that God offered the Torah to all the nations, but they didn't accept it, it's not necessary to believe it literally, but rather it was as good as if it had happened, because God in his omniscience knew that they wouldn't accept it. And that's why he chose Israel, right? And he chose Israel because, Israel received the Torah because they were the people who were ready to receive it. No other nation was ready to receive it. But the invitation remains open to anyone of any nation to join Israel, right? And in doing so, if they embrace the Torah, they become part of Israel. They don't become a new separate nation that then is parallel to Israel or to replace Israel. They are then merged with Israel, right? And that merging requires that they not delete Israel, or they not try to compete with Israel. If you're trying to compete with the people of Israel, you have not truly merged with Israel. That's my basic idea. In the words of the son of Maimonides, Rabbeinu Avraham ben Rambam, there is no obligation to accept every opinion, every non-legal opinion in the Talmud or the Midrash. It's certainly within your right to disagree with my explanation of it or with the sages' non-legal explanations in total. I would not recommend that. I think it's foolish and presumptuous to take their words in an ultra simplistic way. I think that really undermines their intelligence as well as undermines the intelligence of the person who does that. And there are many people who view themselves as really, big shots. Like they're so intellectual that they realize how stupid the sages of Israel were to say crazy things. I find it more reflective of their lack of intelligence and lack of humility and lack of awareness of the sophistication of ancient peoples, lack of awareness that modern man really isn't all that different than ancient man was. Rather, most, if not all, of our greatness is due to the fact that we stand on the shoulders of giants. If we were to throw away all the classic works that have developed us up to this point to do the great things we do, we would fall flat on our faces. And that even includes impressive people such as Elon Musk or Bill Gates or whoever else, right? So yeah, I think there's a lot of depth and truth to the words of our sages, even in the sometimes seemingly ridiculous midrashic literature. But I think we're also foolish to imagine that they intended us to take their words so simplistically. 𝗏𝗏 𝗰𝘃𝘂𝗏. Let's continue.
That's fair enough, but it raises something else that if they're the only ones that accepted it, and then there's also the plating that it was the offer was given in duress.
In other words, what you're saying is the mountain hung on top of them, kind of like they were between a rock and a hard place.
They didn't have a choice. It's almost it's weird. They'd say, well, whatever he said, whatever you say, we'll do it. In other words, they agreed to it beforehand. Then it's like forced on them, and then but it's all
not truly forced, but the reality forced them.
They didn't have a choice. It was like go back to Egypt and die in the desert, or go with Hashem.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's partly why to keep the covenant of Torah means you also have to have a circumcised heart. This is not a Christian fabrication. Right. They do often, as many things in the Torah get misunderstood. The concept of a circumcised heart is often misunderstood as if to say, now that my heart is circumcised, I don't have to really keep his commandments. I just kind of go with a touchy-feely way of, personal, subjective spirituality. That's not what it means. But the concept of having a circumcised heart is explicit in the text of the Torah, and it's part of the covenant of Torah. So we accepted that, but still the responsibility remained on us to develop ourselves on an individual level to the point that we would accept it willfully, willingly, with knowledge and understanding.
I see the desert as as you said, we don't have a choice. That
was on a national level, by the way.
Right. Now on an individual level, it's your choice. You can choose to take that on and or say I don't want it.
Absolutely. And I would say also, even on the individual level, there is choice in it. But even on the individual, and even as a nation in the desert, there was choice in it. We could have just gone back to Egypt, but we didn't, despite the mumblings and the rebellions. But as a nation, we did not go back to Egypt, even with our shortcomings. But also, even today on an individual level, there is still free choice, but there is also still a mountain. Figuratively speaking, there is still a mountain over us that compels us, doesn't force us, but it compels us by reason if we do not bury our heads in the sand. And that mountain that's hung over us, that compels us to accept the Torah, that mountain is reality. That the more a person opens his eyes to reality and to timeless principles, time-proven principles, many of which are evident in the philosophies and religions all over the world, many of these principles become recognizable as inescapable, time-proven realities that you just can't escape. And that, I think, is a continual mountain that's held over the head of anyone who has the eyes to see it. Over everybody, over all the nations. But they don't see it. And when you don't see it, you don't experience it. So you don't stand in Mount Sinai. But if you do open your eyes to it, if you don't bury your head in the sand due to the fleeting lusts of the flesh or the fleeting responsibilities of everyday life, which are important, but they're fleeting. If you don't allow those things to blind you, then you, wherever you are, will find yourself under that mountain with no other choice by force of reason to accept the Torah. But it's not up to us to coerce it on them. It's up to them to reach that point by themselves in their own humility, in their own willingness to open their eyes. Not everybody's at that point. So the mountain is there for everyone, but not everybody sees it. Let's continue with our looking at the basic Torah duties in summary of observing Shavuot. This is, of course, on a fundamental level. We're not yet looking at the nuanced customs and how we celebrate it outside the land of Israel. This still remains everlasting stipulations of the covenant between God and Israel, of the covenant of Torah. Just because we're not doing something doesn't mean it's now no longer part of the covenant between God and Israel. Absolutely is. All right. Heather, would you like to read? This is the first of the commandments regarding Shavuot.
If you can have somebody else do it for a moment, because
Sure,
I'm
no problem.
relocating.
No problem. You're what? You're relocating?
Yeah, I'm moving, so I'm not in the direction of the line.
All right. So while Heather continues in her pilgrimage to another location, let's have Mr. Victor read for us the first of these obligations. It's not necessarily the first in order of appearance in the Torah. I've listed them in order of their execution, meaning in the order of how we do them as a nation.
Three
Number
times a year, all your males shall appear before the Lord your God at the place which he chooses, at the feast of unleavened bread, at the feast of weeks, and at the feast of huts. Deuteronomy
Right.
16:16.
Beautiful. Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 16. Pilgrimage to the sanctuary. Number 2, that we rejoice in the pilgrimage. Okay, so it's not supposed to be a super sullen, somber pilgrimage, but it is a joyful experience to rejoice in each festival, Shavuot included, Pentecost included, primarily by bringing the peace offering of joy. All right, and this is found in Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 14, where it says, you shall rejoice in your feast, in your Hag. And Hag, this Hebrew word Hag, has a dual connotation in ancient Hebrew, both of a holy day, a uniquely celebratory holy day, but also a pilgrimage.
Can you leave the slide up?
Move the slide up?
Leave the slide up.
Oh, sure. So also this word Hag also has the connotation of a cycle, whether in time, meaning it's annual, and that comes down to us in modern Hebrew in the form of the modern Hebrew term for a course, like a university course, which is called a hug, et vav gimel, because it's a cycle. It comes, every year they're offering it. And it's also understood not just in the sense of a time cycle of time, but it's also understood in the sense of the pilgrimage, in that you go from your place of habitation where you live, you then go to a certain destination, and then you return. So you make a cycle, a circuit. So Hag has the connotation of a celebratory feast, a cycle, and a circuit. All of that is in one word. Yes, sir.
If I understood you correctly, the command to rejoice, to me, sounds like don't be in a bad mood. But what you just read plates it as bring the offering. So, in other words, can you be in a great mood and so happy to be there and without bringing the peace offering? Is it directly connected to that offering?
Absolutely.
Is the definition of being joyful or having
On a
being
fundamental level, the joy is in the act of bringing that offering. That's right.
that's
If
amazing.
if we're not able to bring that offering, we still should strive to be joyful. Like any commandment, if we're not able to do one aspect of that commandment, that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to do those aspects of the commandment that are uh, are within our reach, right? So even if we're not able to bring the offering in the place that the Almighty chose due to the sins of our nation as a nation, i.e., we could actually bring this offering if we got our act together as a people, but on an individual level, we're not able to do this. You can't, this is not something you can do just all by yourself. You try to do this on the Temple Mount, you're gonna get arrested or shot, heaven forbid. So this requires national repentance, national reconfirmation, reaffirmation, reacceptance, renewal of the covenant, i.e., a renewed covenant, a Brit Hadashah. And this is what we long for on a national level. But in lieu of that, until we have that, we still rejoice to the extent that we're able. And you can do that symbolically with a delicious meat meal at your festive table. And this is on the condition that you like meat. If eating meat is going to make you sad, you are exempt from eating meat on your Shabbat table. Shavuot is a type of Shabbat. 𝗍𝗶. Number two, the additional offering was called the Musaf, right? This is an additional offering in the temple. Would you like to read, Habibi?
To bring the additional Musaf sacrifice offering, I would prefer to put there, on the 50th day, Shavuot. On the day of the first fruits, you shall bring a burnt offering.
Right, Numbers chapter 28, verse 26 through 27. And also, corresponding to this, we have an additional prayer among our regular daily prayers. We have an additional formal prayer called the Musaf prayer, which corresponds to this offering. So although the Musaf prayer that we say on Shavuot is not an explicit commandment in the Torah, but it is also not simply some random custom that just developed. Rather, it was intentionally established by the ancient sages of Israel, if not the prophets of Israel, as a commemoration corresponding to the Torah commandment. So if we're not able to bring this offering in accordance with God's explicit commandment on Shavuot, we can at least do it symbolically, which really the physical, literal offering in the temple is itself a symbol of a reality that should be present within us, right? So on a fundamental level, we're still bringing this offering. The offering is in our hearts. As it says in the prophets, that I believe is in the book of Jeremiah, I believe it was in last week's Haftarah, the prophet Jeremiah equates, well, I think it's chapter 17. I'm not going to try to guess the verse, but there the prophet equates the heart with an altar. Okay, so we can still, on a very fundamental level, and a very psycho-spiritual level, make this offering. But the deeper picture that the offerings, the physical offerings in the temple point to, that deeper reality does not nullify the physical reality any more than your commitment to your wife nullifies the need for an actual marriage ceremony, or your love for your wife nullifies the need for manifesting it physically in some tangible way. Imagine if you told your wife, after you missed your anniversary celebration, you told your wife, "Oh, why are you so upset, honey? What matters is what's in my heart." How do you think that would go over? If that was understood in the marriage that you would celebrate it every year, it's not going to go over very well. So likewise here. Yes, there are inner realities, but the inner reality, if it is true, should manifest physically. And that is what we do on a national level as a people united in our covenant between God and ourselves, the people of Israel. That is what we do on a national level every year in the temple. 𝗦𝗵𝘃𝘂𝘃𝗂. May it be rebuilt speedily. All right, number 2, the wave offering. 𝗥𝗲𝗰𝗃𝗃. Go right ahead.
Who's up?
You're up. I believe this is 4.
Wave offering. To bring 2 loaves of leavened bread as a wave offering with the Shavuot sacrifice offerings from the land of your habitation, you shall bring 2 wave loaves. Leviticus 23:17.
Okay. And the straightforward text of the Torah does not go into detail about what these symbolize. However, we have many examples of things that come in pairs in the Torah, several examples. And when it comes to symbolic things such as this, I think that they are literary devices to provide opportunities for intertextuality. Whatever you may recall of other places, remember, people didn't have printed texts of the Bible everywhere like we do now. But this could be a reference back to all those other fundamental concepts of twos. That's the way I take it. Personally, you can take it however you like. So I take this as a reference back to the 2 cherubs on the Ark of the Covenant, which I take to be a reference to the 2 dominant inclinations of man, the positive and negative inclinations, which I also see symbolic in male and female, right? And both of those inclinations are, in the words of our sages, angels of the Most High. They are angels within us, right? They are 2 aspects of our being, meaning there are 2 angels, so to speak, 2 agents or principal forces created within us through which we serve God. We don't serve them and worship them, and by that worship serve God. No, we worship God directly, but our worship of God is by using these 2 things. We use them, meaning we should serve God both with our proactive tendencies as well with by means of surrendering our more negative impulses. Both should be bowed to God in worship and submission to God, like the cherubs on the Ark of the Covenant in the temple. Similarly, you have, so to speak, in modern lingo, the left brain and the right brain. You have the creative tendency, which, although it sounds positive, can actually be destructive when it is not surrendered to reason. So you have the principle of reason in every man and the principle of creativity or chaos. Chaos is not inherently bad. And you have beauty when those are balanced, but not when each is allowed to run unrestrained. So again, we wave both of these before God in the temple. I think that this is part of what is symbolized here. Also, perhaps, Israel and the nations. That is, the people of Israel as founded in the family of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then those who joined unto them, and they are waved together, held up by one man, right? And Israel is often referred to as one man. First fruit offering, 𝗥𝗲𝗰𝗃𝗃.
To bring the first fruits, bikurim, at the festival of weeks, Shavuot. The first of the first fruits, you shall bring them to the priests. Exodus 23, verse 19.
Right? And I haven't brought an exhaustive list of all the verses related to Shavuot, Pentecost, that we find in the Torah. They're not all listed in this slide. There are many verses. So I will just say off the top of my head, you can find them. There are verses that refer to Pentecost, Shavuot, not only by the Hebrew name Shavuot, but also by the Feast of Bikurim, the Feast of First Fruits. These are the same holiday, same day, right? It's also called the 𝗥𝗲𝗰𝗃𝗃, the harvest holiday, the harvest festival. And this, though we see the literal harvest of the first fruits being brought this is also where you can perhaps see the concept of the giving of Torah and the harvesting of the nations. They are harvested together, collected together through the mixed multitude that come and join themselves to Israel. For better or worse, they have joined themselves to Israel. So it's our choice to choose to make it for the better. But there you can see the concept, the deeper concept, the deeper symbolism in the harvest. The harvest is not just grain, but it's also people gathered together and then brought to the temple, as the prophets had a continual vision of, that one day when we return to God as a nation, then the nations themselves will be brought to God and gather there, and his house will be called a house of prayer for all nations. There are a lot of word plays in the Hebrew that you can see these correlations that get lost in the English. Mr. Victor, 𝗬𝗓, your turn.
First fruits offering.
Yes, sir. Here we go. It's a continuation of the first fruits offering.
He places it beside the altar, bows, and exits. Then you shall set it down before the Lord your God, and you shall bow down before the Lord.
You shall bow down prostrate, flat.
But before the Lord your God, Mishnah 𝗣𝗿𝗰𝗃𝗃 3:6, Deuteronomy 26:10.
All right. So we see here that there is a divine commandment, an explicit commandment in the Torah to prostrate flat before the Almighty. It's very important to remember for anyone who says we're not allowed to prostrate because the Goyim do it or the Muslims do it. Okay, so you just want to erase one of the 613 commandments because the Goyim do it. Doesn't make any sense. Remember this. It's a proactive commandment.
Practical of this, I'm thinking of Passover. Not everyone brought in a lamb and slaughtered it. Only,
representatives
do it for a big crowd, 20.
Yeah.
But the two loaves, is that not a national item? In other words, the two loaves are.
Yes. Yeah, that's a national item. Absolutely, that's right.
But here we see the who's doing the prostrating. Is it those who are bringing that national offering, or is it everybody running in and
whoever is bringing the offering is the one who bows down and prostrates? That's right.
Okay.
Ideally, it would be everybody. It depends on the feasibility of the facility, and we know from history, from rabbinic literature, that the azara, the courtyard, can be expanded, right? And hypothetically, it could be expanded ad infinitum. Like it can be expanded indefinitely, according to the resources and needs of the people.
Yeah, there are two large buildings to the north and south that open to the Azara that would normally not be used, but they are used for slaughtering lambs during Passover and things like that. That they're considered additional slaughter areas. So that makes sense, and a lot of room to prostrate. And technically, you'd be prostrating before the altar. Yeah.
So this is also a great image where we see that the spirit of gratitude that we are cultivating a mindset of in the bringing of the bikurim, the first fruits. It's to culminate in a spirit of surrender to the will of God. And that's symbolized in the complete prostration. The word used there for prostration is 𝗟𝘄𝘀. This is not just simply a little nod of the head or even just a simple bending of the knee. It is a complete and total flattening of oneself before the reality of the Creator, the God of Israel. All right, so this is a sort of prostration that Muslims, the supposed champions of prostration, never do for some reason. In Israel, in the people of Israel, we can prostrate ourselves in a manner simply on our knees with our foreheads to the ground. That's beautiful. But the ideal form of prostration when one is able to, when circumstances allow, is not just a bending of the knee and the forehead on the ground, which is a kneeling of, it's a surrender of the knees, the hands, and the mind to God. But it's also, this is very important on a symbolic level, when you're able to do it, it's also a surrendering of the seat of human sensuality and lusts. So we don't just put our intellect on the ground, we also surrender and flatten our entire bodies. We do not offer God our minds without also offering him the proverbial seat of human sexuality, which is not an evil thing, right? We are also to worship God with that, with every aspect of our being. And so when we go throughout our entire lives worshiping God and we never fully prostrate, also offering in service of God the seat of sensuality, we have not fully worshiped God. Now, we can worship God fully and prostrate before him even with the seat of our sensuality without doing it physically. But if you're able to do it physically, when you're able to do it, then you should. And we should question religions that have the full capacity to do so, but never do. I think we know them by their fruits, to quote a famous rabbi. We know them by their fruits. And in the words of Maimonides, for those who may be aghast, accept the truth, 𝗦𝗵𝘃𝘂𝘃𝗶𝗰𝗲. 𝗣𝗿 𝗰𝗵𝘃𝘃. Accept the truth from whoever said it. All right, Heather, tur shalach.
𝗧cie 𝗿𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗶, creative work on Shavuot, sanctifying it as a holy convocation. You shall proclaim on this very day that it be a holy convocation. You shall do no servile work. Leviticus chapter 23, verse 21.
Okay, so in summary, Shavuot, Pentecost, is a day that we rejoice before the Almighty, but we don't rejoice. It is not a rejoicing in the Lord. It is not a kosher rejoicing and in surrender of God's will. If we're just doing it however we feel like it, however some spirit leads me to do it, some spirit that runs contrary to his expressed everlasting commandments, right? So the way in which we rejoice before God must be within the framework of his commandments, including the commandment to rest from creative activity, that is the 39 malachot, specific actions which are associated with industrious labor, regular creative activities such as, plowing a field or sewing garments. All right, we don't have to go into the details of each one, and you don't have to be a master of each one as a general principle until one has learned more. The type of forbidden activities are those activities that are traditionally associated with industrious labor of various types, and there are 39 major categories. Anybody have any questions till we continue? I apologize for the lighting. I didn't expect to be here, but I have lost access to the internet at the synagogue, suspiciously. That's a story into itself. I can't hear you.
I said interesting. So you're not in your office.
No, that's where my light and camera is. I apologize for that.
No, it's fine.
Any questions?
Check chat here.
Yalla. Yeah, okay. Check the chat. Check the chat.
Have you got some awesome things to bring out here?
Nothing comes to mind immediately.
All right. In that case, 𝗿𝗿 𝗰𝘃𝘃𝗃. Okay, and finally, compassion, right? So how is the commandment that our worship of God should not lack the expression of compassion? How is this tied to Shavuot? Heather, b'chavod. with honor.
The spirit of Torah is the spirit of mercy and compassion. And when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not wholly reap the corners of thy field, neither shall you gather the gleaning of your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and for the newcomer. I am the Lord your God. Leviticus chapter 23, verse 22.
So in the same spirit as this, the Rambam wrote that there is no joyful celebration and joyful feasting of God's holy days at a table that is void of the poor or immigrants or people who are suffering or sad or lonely. So we have to make sure, if it's within your ability, and for the average American, it's within our ability to host at least one or two guests. It's a duty that, okay, we may not have a field. Not everybody is a farmer nowadays. In biblical times, most people had at least one small field in which they harvested things. Nowadays, it's not the reality for most people. The least we can do in the spirit of this commandment is to make sure that our proverbial field is the table, all right, where we're presenting all that we've earned and grown, so to speak, in our employment. So to maintain a corner at our field, our table, to have a corner for somebody to sit who has less than us, and make sure that they know that they're invited, right? That they have a place at the table at the altar of the Most High, right? That God is the God who is a father to the fatherless and who's the provider to the widows. Right? He is the one who cares about not just the wealthy and the influential, but also the most lowly. And the humble and contrite spirit, I shall not refuse, right? So he is made great in our showing compassion to the lowly. And if we are not careful to do that, then what kind of rejoicing are we doing? In the words of Maimonides and 𝗟𝘄𝘀 and the laws in the Mishnah Torah, and the laws of the resting on the holy days, he says, if your feasting does not include these and rejoicing their hearts, then this is not a rejoicing of the Lord, but rather this is a feeding of your gluttonous bellies. And of such a person it is said, I smear the feces, I smear your feces, the feces of your holidays on your faces, for I did not give commandments such as these. I'm paraphrasing, but it uses strong language like this in the prophets. So it's of such sort of Torah observance that is called commandments of men. It's not that the commandments of God, keeping Passover and Shavuoth, are commandments of men, but rather they are commandments of men. They are man-made commandments. When we turn them from rejoicing before the Almighty with the lowly to a service, not of God, but of our bellies and our lusts, that sort of a Torah observance is a commandment of men. And it is akin to offering God, to appearing before him with feces smeared on our faces. Right? We shouldn't be afraid to describe things for what they are, especially in the words of the prophets. So this is the beauty of the God of Israel, that there is no joy, there is no true worship without concern, sympathy, and action to show care for those who are neglected. And
Yeah, those that are neglected, if they see you feasting and rejoicing and they're
holier than thou.
You're revealing a side of Hashem that doesn't exist. You're putting
That's
him
right.
in
That's idolatry, and that's idolatry.
Mm-hmm.
We're turning our bellies into our God, and we're presenting that image that this is the God of Israel, not
Right.
the God of mercy and compassion and reason and reasonableness, but the God of gluttony and self-worship, self-service.
Mm.
All right. Now, observance in exile. Again, this is just a summary. Heather, would you like to read number 1?
Preparation.
All right, preparation. So this is preparing for the holiday. On the holy days that are commanded in Leviticus chapter 23, which, other than the weekly seventh-day Sabbath, those holy days are also called a Sabbath of sorts, but they do not include the prohibition of cooking with fire or heat derived from a fire. So you are allowed to cook on a holy day, even though it includes a prohibition of general creative labors, right? But it doesn't include a prohibition of cooking with fire if it's in preparation for the meal of that day. However, the sages of Israel did not want that the people of Israel would wait to do all their preparations on the holy day itself, even though it's not forbidden from the Torah, but they saw the nature of the masses who would wait to the last moment and end up turning a day of joy into a day of cooking. So it may be a joyful day for the husband and the children or the guests, but not so much for the wife. So what they did was they enacted a rabbinic decree that we should prepare at least a minimal part of the meal before the holy day begins. And this is where you get the idea of what's called an 𝗟𝘄𝘀, a mixing of cooked dishes. And so the holiday preparations that are done on the holiday itself is considered a continuation of preparation that started before the holiday. And really, we should try to do what we can before the holiday. This is kind of like a reminder to remind ourselves of that. But yeah, there is no prohibition completely of cooking on the holy day itself. It's just that we don't want to wait, and do all of that cooking on the day itself. Right?
Yeah.
But you can do some cooking, especially if it's more enjoyable that way. Also for the wife, who's probably the one cooking, right? More enjoyable for her, right?
Right.
Yes, sir.
The only caveat is there's no prep cooking on Shabbat itself.
Correct. You can do prep cooking on Shabbat itself if it doesn't involve fire, cooking with fire or heat derived from a fire, right? And from the Torah, even that has a degree of permissibility, but there's a lot of fences that were established to distance, proverbial fences, to distance us from a slippery slope into actual cooking with fire on Shabbat. But
Right.
For example, there is not a Torah prohibition of cooking on fire on Shabbat if it is something that's that cooking with fire does not make it more delicious, right? Perhaps it just makes it safer to eat. Or if it's something that was already cooked, then you could cook it with fire on Shabbat. From the Torah, you're allowed to do that. But rabbinic injunctions were made to distance us from being haphazard with this. So generally speaking, you shouldn't be cooking on Shabbat. You can chop up salads within reason, as long as it doesn't become like super, super finely chopped. You can do this on Shabbat. And you can warm up. There are ways you can warm up food on Shabbat or keep it warm. But generally speaking, you want to be cautious not to be meddling with cooking with fire or heat derived from fire. Yeah. And
something
yes, sir.
that's raw and making it edible. My point is basically to show that Shabbat is a more holy day than any high day.
Correct. Right. Other than Yom Kippurim.
Sure.
Yom Kippurim is like a Shabbat. All right, Kiddush. Who can tell us about Kiddush? What is Kiddush? So number one was rabbinic, mostly. But it's necessary for having a relaxed and calmed mindset on the holy day, on Shavuot, because you took care of everything you needed to. But number two is Kiddush. What is Kiddush?
That separating the day from a common day.
That's right. So the word Kiddush is from the Hebrew word to distinguish or to separate, to make a distinction. And although Shavuoth is not the weekly seventh-day Sabbath, but God does describe these holy days as Shabbat Shabbaton, as a sort of Sabbath. So, just as on the weekly seventh day, we're commanded in the Ten Commandments to remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, so also we apply that to the holy days because God also calls them a Sabbath, right? And in the same manner that the Hebrew word to remember is zachor, and this same root means to mention with words. So we fulfill, or one of the ways we fulfill this distinguishing this day from the rest of the week, we do so with words. And that is what Kiddush is. It's a proclamation of the sanctity of the day. We do it with words. And this is a fulfillment of a Torah commandment, even in the Ten Commandments itself. And a man or a woman can do this. Yes, sir.
Love that you're putting that in, because a lot of times we don't recognize that the statement is required. In other words,
Yeah.
we're going to
If
do
you're
all
able
this.
to do it, of course. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so on a fundamental level, it's not the holding of the wine. People usually associate Kiddush with the holding of the wine. It's the utterance. It's not the wine. The wine is required by rabbinic
Ruling
codification of how we do it, but it's not the Torah commandment. The basic Torah commandment is with your mouth and with your mind. You should know what you're saying. And we do it with a cup of wine or grape juice to beautify it, to make it momentous, right? And that is a rabbinic halacha. We're supposed to do that. But if you happen to not have wine, it doesn't mean you can't do Kiddush. You should still do Kiddush, even if you do not have the cup of wine or grape juice. And usually this is done in the prayer. But if you did not say the evening prayer, then you have to do it verbally by itself. If you happen to not have a cup of wine, though you should have done that as part of the preparation, if you happen to not have it, you can rely on the fact that you proclaimed the sanctity of the day in the evening prayer, right? That's assuming you did the evening prayer. A person who's not accustomed to doing the evening prayer needs to make a point to do it. And it's sufficient if a person simply hears someone else who's obligated in the holy day, an Israelite. It's sufficient if you hear them say it and you have in mind that you agree with them, that's sufficient. But you need to hear it, right? They can do it vicariously, so to speak. All right, number 3.
Joyful feast with guests.
All right, we covered that before. That needs to include, yes, it's great to have your family and friends over. That's also fulfillment of rejoicing, but it must include also people who are often neglected. Okay. Number 4, Heather.
Community prayer and Hallel.
All right, and again, all 7 of these are things we can do even in the exile. So tell us about the community prayer and Hallel. So we have the regular daily prayers that correspond to the daily offerings or sacrifices in the temple. And then we also have the Musaf, daily unique offering, the additional offering of the holiday. So that's the daily prayers. If you have a synagogue or a place of worship where they worship the one God of Israel and embrace the Torah, you should go there. If you're able to, you should go there. And included in it is Hallel. Who can tell us what Hallel is? Mazeh Hallel. Mazeh Hallel. So Hallel is the reciting of psalms, right? These are special psalms that are recited on certain days of the week. I can show it. I'm going to pull it up for you.
It's starting at 145, right?
That is Psuke de Zimra. That is the ancient tradition of reciting psalms before the morning prayers.
Okay.
115 through 19, is that?
Yes, sir. Not through 19.
Okay.
up to 19. Where is it? Did I not have it in here? Okay, maybe it's over here. Here we go. Here's Hallel. All right. Victor, would you like to read?
Watch it. Watch it.
Hallel.
There are 18 days in a year when Hallel, 113 through 118,
Psalm 113 through 118. Yeah.
Must be recited in full. 8 days of Sukkot, 8 days of Hanukkah, first day of Passover, and on Shavuoth. Hallel is recited 21 days in a year in locations where the biblical holy days are observed for 2 days. One can fulfill the recitation of Hallel according to any custom. We will, however, be using the custom of the ancient sages of Israel. Unbolded sections should be skipped on days of voluntary communal recitation, new moons, and the intermediate days of Passover. One should not recite the blessing on those days. However, whether alone or with a minyan, on days that Hallel must be recited in full, before beginning recitation, one blesses.
All right. So whether you are able to make it to a synagogue and observe Shavuot with a community or not, even if you're all alone in the middle of the woods in rural Alabama, you still, if you have embraced Torah according to the laws and judgments of the people of Israel, then after you have said the morning prayer, you want to recite Hallel, Psalm 113 through 118. Okay, and I have it here in the Siddur. It's widely available on the internet. And that is a part of observance of Shavuot that you can do even if you're not able to be in the land of Israel. Right, and next we have Mr. Victor.
Reading of the Ten Commandments.
All right, so this is not a Torah commandment to do this on Shavuot, but it is an ancient practice of the people of Israel all around the world, whether Ashkenazi or Sephardic or Middle Eastern, Yemenite. It is a momentous time where we read the Ten Commandments in a special way in the synagogue for the community. And if you do not have a synagogue, invite some friends over to read through the Ten Commandments together. There's more than one way to skin a cat, right? It's not all or nothing. And then also there is a ancient tradition of reading the book of Ruth. Again, neither of these things are fundamental elements of celebrating Shavuot like the aforementioned are. But it certainly helps make it more meaningful, especially for people who are separated from a established community. Right? And the book of Ruth is very, very relevant and fitting for Shavuot because it's a reminder that the door to Mount Sinai and entering into the covenant remains open. Right? So just as people of various nationalities joined the people of Israel at the exodus of Egypt and stood and accepted the Torah and entered into the people of Israel as part of their nation at Mount Sinai, so also we see in the book of Ruth that invitation remains open even long after Mount Sinai for all generations, even to those that one might accept, even to those that one might expect would be excluded, such as a Moabite, right? As Ruth was a Moabitess. I know people have questions. I will wait for them to ask their questions in the comments and respond. All right, Heather, number 7.
Havdalah.
All right, מה זה Havdalah? What is Havdalah? מה זה Havdalah?
As we set it apart, we will set it apart again.
That's right, at the beginning and at the end. That's right.
Or, by opening our mouth and mind.
Exactly. So if you don't have access to a cup of wine or grape juice to beautify it, as we should if we're able, If you don't have access to spices on Shabbat, for example, you can still do Havdalah. And as you said, Havdalah is basically just a final Kiddush. Kiddush means to sanctify, Havdalah means to separate. The word Havdalah is really just a commentary on the word Kiddush. They're basically the same thing. So we have a Kiddush at the beginning and a Kiddush at the end. And if you did not succeed for whatever reason, even neglect, you forgot to do Havdalah at the end of the holy day, you can still do it the next day. You can still do it the next day, right? But there's no reason you should set a reminder, make sure you do it. When night falls, the appearance of 3 stars, then you will at least utter it with your mouth. Blessed is he, most worthy of praise and source of all blessing is he. The eternal, the venerable, powerful over us, King of all existence, who separates between the holy and the mundane. All right, that's it. You can say it in your own words. You don't have to say that whole mouthful. Praised be he who separates between the holy and the mundane. Right? And you can find the full text online, plenty of places where you can find that on the internet. This is 2025. But I'd encourage you to print it out and put it on your refrigerator or somewhere where you'll remember to get into the habit. So that concludes it for the basic observance of Shavuot, the holiday of Passover, the holiday of Pentecost, the true Pentecost, the historical Pentecost, the Pentecost, celebrating Pentecost, the Feast of Weeks, celebrating it not according to the whims of our spirit, which is easy to be mistaken for God's spirit. Let us never make that mistake, heaven forbid. But celebrating Pentecost, the Feast of Weeks, according to God's spirit, according to the spirit of his Torah, which never contradicts the words of his Torah. Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, blessed be he and blessed be his name. Anybody have any questions before we conclude?
Yeah, doing it our way, how would we say be doing a foreign service? What do we see today that people do in this observance incorrectly?
Well, I would say number one, the day itself. Many people who intend, right? They have good intentions. So no doubt God will forgive those who with sincerity of heart make mistakes. But they should, they know that they have a duty to be learning. So they should be researching and learning. So let's say number one, most people who imagine that and they're trying to keep Pentecost, they're not even doing it on the 50th day after the first day of Passover, right? So how is that Pentecost? The word Pentecost means 50. 50 what? Ask yourself, if you think you're keeping Pentecost, but you've just been doing it with your local community and nothing that we've been talking about here sounds familiar, maybe start by asking yourself, Pentecost means 50. 50 what? What is that? 50 from what? Right? So number one, you need to be doing it on the correct day. It's not just whenever we feel like, right? The Torah was given to the people of Israel as a nation. You do not have to be born to a Jewish mother to embrace the Torah and formally join the people of Israel. The door is open to anyone who sincerely comes. Who sincerely comes. No one's pushing you. There's not a literal mountain over you. You're not literally in the desert. But we should not be saying we are God's people when we knowingly turn our ears away from God's word. He who turns his ear away from hearing the Torah, even his prayer is an abomination. So once we know better, we should not imagine and go around saying, I'm God's people, I've replaced the Jews, right? We are now the real spiritual Israel, yet we're turning our ears away from God's Torah? Who are we kidding? Who are we kidding? If you know better, find a Jewish community, start celebrating Shavuot with them on the appropriate day. Don't call it Shavuot if it's not Shavuot. Don't call it Pentecost if it's not Pentecost. Pentecost isn't just whatever we feel like, right? And the Spirit of God is not just whatever whim flies through our heads. Every emotional impulse is not the Holy Spirit. We have to recognize that. The spirit of holiness is not a spirit of confusion. It's not a spirit of every man to himself. What is that verse? A well-known verse. Woe is the generation that every man is doing what is right in his own eyes. That is not the Holy Spirit. If every second church is doing something different with the Holy Spirit telling them to do X, Y, Z, but they're all doing something different, it cannot be that that's all the Holy Spirit. You cannot make a decision reasonably, sincerely, and conclude that something is the Holy Spirit just because you feel it, just because you heard a voice, just because you had a vision. How many people have come before us and established new religions because they had visions? Who are we to doubt that they actually experienced something? God himself told us, even if they do a sign or a wonder and it comes to pass, yet they lead you to go contrary to the word that I've commanded you this day. What day? The day that Moses took you out of the land of Egypt. Even if they do signs and wonders, do not heed them. It's a false prophet. The revealed things are to us and to our children forever. To do all the words, all the matters of this Torah. What Torah? This Torah. This Torah, the Torah of Moses in the day that he took us out of Egypt. That is Deuteronomy 29, verse 29. What Torah are we obligated to do forever? This Torah, not a Torah that's over the sea, not a Torah that's after the Messiah, not a new Torah, the Torah of Moses. And anyone who rises and tells you to do differently is speaking rebellion against the God of Israel. And if he says he's doing it in the spirit of the God of Israel, he's speaking blasphemously, audaciously. He's speaking in the name of the God of Israel, speaking things that God did not tell him. God have compassion on that same one, because we're not supposed to. If you look in the Torah, we're not supposed to call them out. It's intolerable.
So for the people that are reading the Torah and they're seeing the method of declaring a month so that feast days can be set, and they look at it and they say, well, it says to do it this way, and they look at their Jewish calendar and they go, whoop, they're doing it, on a different day than what I've calculated
I calculated, right,
in the text. In other words, why do we go with the people who aren't say running witnesses up to look at the new moon, and why is that calendar that not being obeyed? In other words, how do we justify that?
As a nation, we have to reestablish the Great Sanhedrin, reestablish our national court. That's a duty upon us as a nation. It's not something that one individual can do, but that is a duty that we have. Until we do that, and until we at least agree to recognize a court that is qualified, it doesn't have to be the Great Sanhedrin. But practically speaking and realistically, if we would make even a non-Sanhedrin court that we would recognize, then we might as well and likely would just go ahead and make a Great Sanhedrin. But until we do that, as a nation, we are violating the covenant. We have to. It's a fact that we need to, biblically speaking, and from the perspective of classical Judaism, we are continually violating that duty. But until we have that, it is not every man for himself. Until we have that, we go according to the last decree regarding the calendar, the last decree of the Great Sanhedrin, the last Sanhedrin that we had, the last Great Sanhedrin that we had. So we go according to that calendar. It is not, if the new moon is established just by anyone witnessing it, then we would have different communities all celebrating on different days because people see the new moon at different days. When the Torah says you, it's speaking to us in submission, in recognition of the authority of the Great Sanhedrin that God established. This is clear in Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 8 through 11, and numerous other places. This is something that's understood inherent in the text. That when it says you, it says you in submission to the judges that I, the Almighty, appointed to you, right? If you don't understand that, then you're outside the fold of the nation of Israel. Simple as that. They can continue to do what they want. They can call themselves Israel if they want. That's fine. And you can call yourself a dodo bird as well. You're not going to last for very long. We've seen what happens for the last 2,000 years to every group that claims to usurp the people of Israel. They do not last. So be smart, be humble, do what's best for you. What's best for you is to not be an island unto yourself and worship God, just every man unto himself, but heed the sages of ancient Israel, heed the prophets of Israel who call you to heed the judges of Israel. We're not talking about the wicked judges. The faithful of Israel today are not the descendants of the wicked of Israel. It was not the wicked of Israel that preserved the Torah. The only reason you even have a Bible to debate with us about is because you received it from the Jewish people. Right? You wouldn't even have a Bible to open up and read if you had not received it from the Jewish people. So the Jewish people alive today are not the wicked and sinful generation, right? And if they are, then why are you trusting the Bible that they gave you? Doesn't make any sense. That's that. So yeah, it's not every man for himself unless you want God, unless you imagine that God commanded a religion that inherently from the outset is going to fragment into 1,000 different religions. There's a reason that despite 2,000 years, the Jewish people are incredibly united. Yeah, we're not perfect, but we are incredibly united, especially relative to other religions, which are known for slaughtering each other or fragmenting into thousands of denominations. So that's that. That's a topic into itself. If anybody has any other questions, you can send them to our WhatsApp group, our Telegram group, or on Facebook, and you can message me anytime. I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. So that concludes the Mishnah Walk's class on basic observance of Shavuot, Pentecost. And please look up last year's lesson where we delved into the deeper meanings of Shavuot. We will share that as well. You should be able to find that also where this will be posted. On that note, Birkat Hashem Aleichem, God's blessings be upon you, and Mu'adim L'Simcha. Mu'adim L'Simcha. Pilgrimage festivals for joy. Hagim Uzmanim L'Sason. Holidays and special appointed times for joy. Shalom Uvracha.